Your main man has had a lot of people asking him to come back with some more wrestling videos, and I haven't done one in a long time. I don't believe I've done one this year at all. I was just looking at the WWE.com and their Hall of Fame section, and I had a lot of thoughts. And I said, instead of going through all these, sort of just going off to myself, let me go through them with you guys. And the computer's right in my lap. I'm sorry, it's going to bounce. It's 12:30. I don't have my actual real webcam hooked up. Deal with it. Yeah, sorry. I just got kind of laughing about there. So we're gonna be moving around a little bit. This is gonna be extremely unprofessional quality, even worse than the lofty standards you expect. All right, so let's just go through this. Is WWE.com. This is all the guys they have in the Hall of Fame. Now remember, it's kind of a half wrestling Hall of Fame. It's really a mess, and there seems to be absolutely no criteria other than what the people in the office like and making a certain appeasement. There's tons of guys who have never wrestled or barely wrestled in the WWE throughout the history of wrestling who are not there, who definitely need to be there, but that's an entirely other video. And we're going to kind of go through and establish certain benchmark guys as we're going through the list. There's some people that obviously belong there and that don't. This video is probably going to be really long because I'm just going through all of them. So if you don't want to listen to it, just click off. And again, the video quality will probably be jumpy and bad, so you might just want to flip something else on while you listen to me pontificate upon the annals of professional wrestling. And sadly, I know way too much about wrestling. And not in the way that kids today know it. I mean, going way back to the very beginning of professional wrestling and all the way to today. Now, let's start here with Abdullah the Butcher. It's alphabetized. AB is going to be the first one. Abdullah Butcher, obviously an utterly reprehensible human being. Superstar Billy Graham has actually asked the WWE and lobbied them to take him out of the Hall of Fame since they added Abdullah Butcher. Abdullah Butcher is known to have hepatitis C and compete in bloody matches, and he has infected a minimum of one other wrestler with hepatitis C, and he lost a lawsuit for a tremendous amount of money because of that. So I don't know. Definitely don't get that man to put extra juice on your ribs at Abdullah's House of Ribs in Atlanta, GA, and Chinese food. I always loved Abdullah as a kid, just as the merits of professional wrestler. Absolutely has to be in Hall of Fame. He's uh, probably a top 100 guy in the history of professional wrestling. Number two, Andre the Giant, probably a top 10 guy in the history of professional wrestling and a top WWE, well, a WWF, WWF guy as well. A guy booked out around the territories. We don't really need to say too much about Andre the Giant. Clearly a deserving individual. And Rocco, who and I gosh butchered his first name. He was a little before my time. I've seen some of his stuff. I know a good amount about him. He was definitely someone who was a top guy in his period. So I believe he also deserves to be in there. Antonio Inoki, one of the all-time legends, maybe the number one all-time professional wrestler from Japan, sort of their Hulk Hogan. So if you're going to have Wrestling Hall of Fame, obviously Inoki. I'm going to guess Bob is probably in there too, but we're going to have to go through and see that. Um, Arnold Skolin, I I don't know. I know Arnold Skolin, of course, as the Golden Boy Arnold Skolin, and I've seen a little bit of his stuff. I'm not that familiar with it, to be honest. I know he was a part owner at one point of the WWE, from the way, or WWE, but of the WWF. He was Backlund's manager. He was an office guy, and well, I don't want to go into stories about each one of these guys because it's going to go on. Sadly, I could go into stories probably every single one of these guys, but Skolin, in my mind, I don't know. I'd have to review his credentials a little bit more. Baron Miguel Sakuna. So here's going to be my first guy that I'm going to go, he definitely doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame. I remember him at one point of his career when I was really watching him. We're talking late 70s. He was still doing a little bit of something. I believe he had a tag run in the WWF in the late 70s. But by the 80s, he'd just become a straight jobber. I'm sorry, if at one point in your career you're just a straight up jobber, you're not a Hall of Famer. You're not. And he's a guy that it's the first one I'm going to say right out of the Hall of Fame. He was involved in the WWE in a lot of capacities and doing office stuff. So there you see the political. Big John Studd, tremendous talent, wrestled at the very end of his career in the WWF. Now, of course, a lot of those people who watch Baltimore Orioles games back in the early 90s would remember Big John Studd was there all the time. Big John Studd, one of the original WWE big hard plastic figures. He's main evented, not just in the WWE, but all over. I can't go into all his credentials, but Big John Studd obviously deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. However, He's not a guy I'd put on the top 100 list all time. Coming up next, Bill Watts, the owner of Mid-South Championship Wrestling, the owner of the UWF, a booker for WCW, definitely an all-time top 100 professional wrestler. Anyone that knows anything about the Cowboy or the Midnight Rider, yeah, that man was a Midnight Rider before Dusty was, and that was a hell of a gimmick. His stuff with the Freebirds, his stuff with Sting and the Ultimate Warrior before the Warrior was the Warrior when he was Rock. The Blade Runners, his stuff, tons and tons of. We can go way back in the 70s. I'm only familiar with Watts up into about the late 70s in terms of actually having watched his in-ring performances. But he was all over. He was a main eventer everywhere. He was, I believe he held a North American championship. In fact, in the picture, he's got some belt. He's got a black and white picture. He's still alive today, and he was also a very talented announcer. I would probably have to put him in the top 10 all-time announcers. So he was very hard, clearly, for his partner to work with. Extremely egomaniacal. Billy Graham, the superstar, too sweet to be sour, the man of the hour, the reflection of perfection, superstar Billy Graham. Graham, another guy, if he's not top 10, he's top 15 all time. WWF World Champion, I think 2 occasions. He was enormously popular. Really, the first steroid guy, the father of steroids in professional wrestling. He was a tremendous interview. Tremendous. Had a lot of issues and problems, and a lot of people say he's kind of batshit crazy. I could do like 18 videos on Superstar Billy Graham. I love listening to him. He's very entertaining. The Blackjacks. The only reason the Blackjacks are going to be in here is because Lanza is, I think, still, or if not still, only recently, he worked in the WWE office for a long time. Of course, Blackjack Lanza, the father of Barry and Kendall Windham, the grandfather of Bray Wyatt or Wyndham Rotunda. Blackjack Mulligan, the master of the claw. I think he went about 6'7", 6'8", maybe build. In the NWA and Georgia Championship, I've seen a good amount of Blackjack. In fact, the first memory I have from wrestling is the Blackjack. I don't know if it was Mulligan or Lanza, but it was about 3 years old, and there was someone wrestling a bear. And I remember the bear, and I remember the name Blackjack. So the guy obviously could cut a promo that made an impression, and he was a very entertaining wrestler, and I think he's having some very bad health problems right now. But again, I'm going to try not to go into too many of these because we're already on B, and who knows? Let me flip back over. Yeah, so we're already at 7.5 minutes. Bob Armstrong. All right. Well, let me go back. So Lanza, definitely not a Hall of Famer. Without a doubt, not a Hall of Fame credential. So you got to get him out there. Blackjack Mulligan, maybe. Like he's very borderline. Not a top 100 guy all time by anyone's count. And Lanza, you got to be kidding me. Bob Armstrong, Bullet Bob Armstrong, the patriarch of the Armstrong clan, father of the late Brad Armstrong, of the Road Dogg, Jesse James, Scott Armstrong, Steve Armstrong of the Wild Eyed Southern Boys. He was a guy who owned bits and pieces or entire territories in the South, but in the really non-prestigious areas in the South. In the South, wrestling was very prestigious. There were a ton of great companies. There were Mid-Atlantic, which is Virginia, and the Carolinas. You had Georgia Championship Wrestling in Georgia, Florida Championship Wrestling with Graham in Florida. Of course, like I said, Georgia Championship Wrestling with Barnett. You had Bill Watts with Louisiana, with Oklahoma and Arkansas, and Bob Armstrong was kind of a guy who'd run maybe just barely into Florida. He'd run in Alabama. He'd run in Mississippi, places like that where it just wasn't, with the Fullers, people of that nature would kind of be in there running territories. And it was like very bottom barrel of professional wrestling. So he was a top guy in a bottom area, just like Tennessee. In fact, even under Memphis, because, Memphis really, to me, was always a bottom barrel kind of deal, although it stayed around forever. So I'm not saying one thing, but it's not a Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling with the Crockett's. It's not Georgia Championship Wrestling that was on TBS. It was all over the country. So to me, he was a big fish in a mud puddle, and he didn't do anything much outside of that regional area. So to me, he's definitely not a Hall of Famer. Probably a guy that doesn't. I would say he probably, if he's lucky, maybe hits a top 500 He's better than Lanza. He has a better, more prestige in terms of the prestige, the impact, what he did, his contributions, even to the shoot degree, to the work degree as well, and what he did in the industry. He has 4 kids that were all professional wrestlers, although one didn't do much, but he was a referee as well. And I think all of his kids have wrestled for Flair at some point. Bob Backlund, obviously a 2-time WWF World Champion. He came back with a crazy run against Bret Hart in the 90s, and he was talented. And he's a guy that didn't really do much outside of the WWE after his first title run. He lost the world title to Sheiky Baby. Well, that man's going to be on here, so we're going to talk about him too. Bob Orton Jr., who is the son of Bob Orton, who is a professional wrestler, and the father of Randy Orton. Bob Orton Jr., the special enforcer on the outside of the main event at WrestleMania 1. I would think anyone that was in the main event of WrestleMania 1 would probably be deserving to be in the Hall of Fame, even including Mr. T. Bob Backlund, though, he's another guy I'd probably not see on the top 100 all time. He was considered a very lame duck champion, and Vince McMahon Sr. had the belt on him for a long time, but it was considered sort of a stubborn move. Backlund didn't draw well. He was nowhere near the league of Bruno Sammartino, nowhere near the league of superstar Billy Graham, and Vince Sr. had that idea to go with him and kept going with him. The guy was reputedly not really bright and maybe didn't fully get it from a ton of interviews that I've listened to. Next, I'm not really going to talk too much about the celebrities. We have Bob Uecker there. He had a lot of contributions. Bob Uecker was really big in the 80s. Probably some of you kids are going to watch have no idea who Bob Uecker even is. But he was a professional baseball player. He was on a show called Mr. Belvedere. He did a bunch of other deals. And he was a regular, he did lots of regular contributions to WrestleMania. I don't know how many he was at, but I'm almost positive it was at multiples. Bobby the Brain Heenan, probably the best WWE manager of all time. As we go through the list, we're going to see if the greatest manager of all time is on here. It is not Bobby the Brain Heenan. There's one man who is head and shoulders above all other managers to a point where it's not really a dispute who the all-time greatest manager is. Bobby Heenan, probably the best in the entire run of the WWE, probably WWF, WWF, whatever you want to call it, probably their best manager. But he was sticky, he was cartoony, and of course, just like I said about Cicluna, he was basically an announcer jobber at the end. His WCW run, almost the entire thing, was the drizzling shits. He was fucking horrible. He should have been fired. He had apparently some drug abuse problems, and he utterly hated Tony Schiavone. But who can blame a man for hating the silver-tongued Tony Schiavone? We used to just rip Tony Schiavone to pieces. When we talk about that, my buddies. Again, this is going to be a long video, so yeah, you just going to deal with it. So next, Bobo Brazil. Bobo Brazil was one of the guys. He's a black wrestler. I want to say he wrestled from like the 50s to the 70s. I don't know his exact numbers. I've seen some Bobo Brazil matches. He had the Coco butt. He was sort of the prototype, because they used to say the blacks had these really hard heads and would headbutt, kind of like the Samoans, continued to do. So obviously at that period of time, you're going to have a degree of racism. Bobo was a face. I'm sure he probably was a heel at some point, but he was a main eventer. He was, for a long period of time, probably the top black wrestler in professional wrestling. He went all over the place, sort of like a special attraction. He'd come in and clean house, and definitely deserving of the Hall of Fame. In terms of his actual in-ring skills, he was fucking horrible. I mean, horrible. He wasn't Ox Baker bad, but Bobo Brazil, you could probably pull one or two of his matches up on YouTube, and you could be the judge of that. Booker T is, with that being said, the contributions he made were big, were tremendous, and he would make my list of top 100 professional wrestlers. Now, I should also say for Bobby the Brain Heenan, Bobby the Brain Heenan was a fantastic in-the-ring performer. Could bump, could sell, could move, and he was a great talker. He could have he probably could have made some fairly more substantial contributions as a professional wrestler if the manager thing didn't come along and sort of limit and stigmatize him in that role. Next guy is Booker T. Booker T to me is sort of the benchmark guy. If you're Booker T, you get in the Hall of Fame. If you're an iota less of a contributor than Booker T, you do not. I would say anyone under Booker T does not get in. Booker T, I don't know where he ranks all time in my list. Definitely does not make the top 100. Um, his in the ring abilities were not very good in terms of his psychology, his ability to sell things like that. He's not a guy that really ever fully got it until his very end towards his WWE stuff. He started in the King Booker stuff when he started showing some charisma and flavor. I thought that was his best stuff ever. Never a Booker T fan. I liked Stevie Ray. I watched Booker T's entire career. In fact, there's an outside. Now I probably missed some of his TNA stuff, but I've seen almost every match he's ever had on TV. He started in Global. I saw his Global stuff, his WCW stuff, his WWE stuff, his TNA stuff, and I think I've seen some random here or there, where he may have wrestled elsewhere. Booker T is the benchmark guy. If you're under him, you don't get in. Bret Hart, personally, I do not like Bret Hart. I never thought he was very good. I think he got the belt particularly because he was clearly not on steroids. They had a steroid scandal. They had all these problems. They wanted a very clean-cut sort of guy, and that being Bret Hart. To me, he was basically Brad Armstrong. He had terrible mic skills. He had no real charisma or ability to work the crowd. The Canadians love him. I know I get hated on by Canadian people. His sharpshooter looked good. His in-the-ring work was perfectly fine. He did the same match over and over again. He was just like Ric Flair, who he knocks for doing that, and he did exactly the same thing. I could sit here and call a Bret Hart match play-by-play, and you could just throw it in on any Bret Hart match. He did exactly the same. He was the side Russian off the second buckle with a bow. Bret Hart, he's going to do side backbreaker. He's going to put on the sharpshooter. They're going to block it. Now he's going to headbutt him right to the crotch. Now he's going to stop him. Now he's going to get him in the corner, do the European uppercuts. It was the same thing over and over again. There wasn't much creativity. You had to sort of work to Bret Hart. I think he's one of the most overrated performers ever in history, and a guy that got way more than he should have. I know Hennig had some injuries that time and some drug abuse problems, but Kurt Hennig, a contemporary of his at the same time, about 1 billion times better than Bret Hart. Next, Bruno Sammartino, a guy who obviously is going to make in terms of contributions and importance, the top 10 list. He held the belt for like 972 years. And he only lost the belt because he begged and pleaded to lose it at times. I think he carried the belt for like 8 years at one point. I mean, this guy, I know a lot about Bruno Sammartino. I love listening to him talk. He has a very interesting voice. I thought he was a good announcer. Some people absolutely hate him. I enjoy Bruno Sammartino a lot. His matches are not what you might necessarily like if you're an ROH fan, but I enjoy listening to him. His style, I'm not going to turn a Bruno Sammartino off if I have like a DVD of classic Madison Square Garden matches or something like that, but at the same time, he's not someone I would look towards seeing. I don't know where he falls, and I'd have to carefully do a contributions and overall importance of individuals in the business to really rank him. Next is Buddy Rogers, the guy he took the belt from. I could get into explaining the whole belt story, but it'd take a minute, so I'm not going to do that. But Buddy Rogers, again, a guy who makes the top 100 list. The Nature Boy, the original Nature Boy, that Ric Flair took the gimmick from, that Buddy Landel took the gimmick from, and who Bruno Sammartino apparently in a shoot took the belt from. So, I don't know. He's another guy obviously going to make the top 100. Clearly Hall of Famer. Bret Hart also deserving the Hall of Fame just in terms of the accomplishments they gave him overall. I always thought he was very marginally, what's the difference between him and Brad Armstrong, really? They're pretty much almost the same guy. So next on the list is going to be Captain Lou Albano. I don't know, man. He was just there for a long time. I guess just being there for a long time gets you in. I would say absolutely not. Bounce your ass down to the sewer, Super Mario. Carlos Colon, again, it's mostly WWE guys, but again, Lou Albano. If Lou Albano's in, why not put Steve Lombardi, the Brooklyn Brawler, in? I mean, come on. That guy certainly made some certain contributions. So he'd been there forever, Lou Albano. I thought he was a terrible manager. I thought he was terrible when I was a kid. I think he was terrible when I was a teenager. I think he's terrible now. He's just not good. Anyone could go up there and be a manager. I could do a job as a manager way better than Lou Albano could. And I'm sure a lot of you could as well. Next, Carlos Colon, the father of, actually, I think one of them was not his nephew or something. But one of the Colones and all, that was a tag team, and also of Carlito, I spit in the face of people that don't want to be cool. So, He was a huge star in Puerto Rico. I haven't seen that much Puerto Rican wrestling. Of course, Bruiser Brody being murdered there before I had the ability to access things or knew who Bruiser Brody was. That really sort of put a bad taste in my mouth for it. So I could talk. I mean, that's the whole video. But Carlos Colon, a legend in Puerto Rico, and there are a lot of political things. A lot of so he. I mean, does he belong in there? Yeah. Is he a top 100 guy? Absolutely not. Chief Jay Strongbow, who is not Native American at all. He is, I want to say, Italian. Scarpa, I think that's his name. He was a big deal in the WWE. He Hogan, the infamous Hogan comeback was Strongbow's. I have seen live in person his guy wrestler's brother Jules Strongbow wrestle. Oh, I don't know, 15 years ago at an event. Him and some other old guys were there, and his match is pretty dreadful. But Strongbow, Hunt top 100, no, he was an agent there. So an office, a political deal. Does he deserve to be in there? Probably. He was a big star in the WWE, and that weighs a lot more when their count. So again, he's kind of like at that Booker T level, like maybe. Don the Rock, yes, the first Rock, not the Rock Rocky Maivia, but Don the Rock Morocco, IC champion. I watched the other night Survivor Series '87, and he's on Hogan's team, and I don't think I've ever, including Scott Steiner, I don't think I've ever seen anyone that's that gassed up. He had like new parts of his body that were muscle, and the veins that were sticking out. I mean, this guy was on some serious gas. Watch Survivor Series elimination match. It's on YouTube, '87, and take a look at Don Morocco, and just wow. Wait a minute, Don Morocco. Oh my God, is Dick Murdoch not in the Hall of Fame? All right, Dick Murdoch is definitely better than anyone on this page. Dick Murdoch was a phenomenal worker, and I cannot believe Dick Murdoch's not in the Hall of Fame. Wow, that's a gross and grotesque oversight. Yeah, so again, so you'll find people like that were tremendous that weren't in there. Donald Trump, that's fucking ridiculous. Drew Carey, again, that's idiotic. I don't know. I heard something about the guy had a drug problem. He looks fucking weird now. If you will, baby. Who's next on there? You understand? Talking about Blue Eye Soul, the half grip, the nation, baby. Talking about my boys are there now. But Dusty Rhodes, if you understand, 3 times NWA champion of the world, baby. So Dusty Rhodes is obviously deserving of being. Dusty Rhodes definitely a top 10 all-time guy. One of my all-time favorites. He's a top 5 on my all-time favorite list. I love Dusty Rhodes. Probably the best babyface promo interview of all time. I mean, who could you put against him in terms of doing a promo, in terms of doing an interview? The charisma he had was unbelievable. The way he could get the fans, the way he could sell, the way he would bleed, the way he would have the mind for the business. You understand, baby? And he would book, and he would come in with all sorts of ideas. He'd put stuff together. We did a lot of things that he might not get credit for. And the guy could go an hour Broadway all day long. The way he looked, so he was in good shape, which it seems paradoxical in some ways. Where some of these gassed up guys, like a Lex Luger, he could have gone there and blown Lex Luger up all day, every day. He had somehow, he could still do. He could get up there. He could drop kick. He could cross body. He could do a lot of stuff, and he could go take, the barbed wires to the flesh. Next on the list, Eddie Graham, legendary promoter out of Florida. He was considered probably the best finish man in terms of booking in the history of professional wrestling. He taught a lot of people. He taught Dusty Rhodes. He taught his son Mike Graham. He taught Bill Watts. He taught a number of other people. I think Ali Anderson learned from him as well. And Graham was, actually, I might take that back. Ali. And Ali's another guy that's not in the Hall of Fame, which is, that's political. It's ridiculous, too. Ali obviously deserves to be there. Eddie Graham was obviously tremendous in that regard, and clearly deserves to be there. Eddie Guerrero, one of the one of the legendary Guerrero family out of Mexico, out of El Paso, Texas. My homie Eddie Guerrero, if you understand. His ECW is where I first became aware of him. I do not like Lucha Libre at all. Eddie Guerrero abandoned the Lucha Libre style by the time he got to WWE, or at least early on in WWE, and worked in American style. He did a lot of work in Japan, a lot of work in Mexico. I've seen some of his things here and there. Again, I'm not a fan of that Mexican style, so I didn't care much about that. When he was in ECW, I think he had the TV belt there. I didn't care much about him. Didn't care much about him in WCW. He had a lot of drug issues. I remember him going out in an interview. He didn't even know what belt he was wrestling for, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal. You don't know what belt you're wrestling for, so how am I going to get involved? How am I going to get interested in a match when obviously you care so little? You mentioned the wrong belt. He was going for a TV belt or US belt, so you mentioned the wrong belt. And it might seem like a small thing, but that stuck with us. Oh boy! And he was on, he was. I don't know if he was on cocaine at the time, but he was not in his right element. But when he came to WWE, when he did the lie, cheat, steal Guerrero thing, that was fantastic. I mean, that was an A+ performance. I don't give an A+ performance out easily. I really enjoyed him. I'm gonna have to say he's probably my favorite Mexican wrestler of all time, and I definitely see him as belonging there. Unfortunately, his career was cut very short. Just when it really got up to that main event level, he dies soon after and loses his career. Edge, probably going to get hate on this. I think Edge is absolutely a guy who doesn't deserve to be there. I mean, why did anyone ever put the belt on him? He just not any good. He had the belt a bunch of times, so he gets in on that merit. I'm not disputing that he shouldn't be in there, but I mean, the guy was he just wasn't special, and he was in a lot of matches with talented people, with Bubba Ray Dudley, with Jeff Hardy, with people that, while there's a problem with Jeff Hardy, he made those matches focused. Believe would put those matches together. Edge happened to be lucky in the right place at the right time. He was taller than Christian, who was a better promo, a better worker, a better seller, better really much at everything. But Edge somehow made some money, and yeah, so I don't know. Next on the list is Ernie Ladd, the big cat. Ernie Ladd was a professional football player. Ernie Ladd was a booker. I think he was the first black booker ever. He did some booking in Mid-South. I think he did some booking in other places. I liked watching Ernie Ladd wrestle. He was, again, a guy, if you watch him by today's standards, you might go, oh, he had a lot of things that looked very sloppy in the ring, but he was like 6'9", he was 300 pounds. He cut a good promo. He was typically, well, he could go babyface or heel, actually, but take that back. He did both. A real bright guy. His shoe number was interesting to listen to. And I remember him from a number of territories. Would I say he's a Hall of Famer? Yes, I would say. But again, he's not up here. He's not a Bruno. He's not a guy like that. The next one on the list, the Fabulous Moolah. She's dead now, but she was considered. I don't believe I've yet to hear a female wrestler say a nice thing about her. She basically broke them into the business and just robbed them blind. She'd say, "Oh, you got to give me 25% of your money," but then she'd get the money, and they wouldn't get close to 75% of their money. So to me, she's a thief. For a lot of people in there, and these women, they weren't making the big money anyway. Pretty much, again, Luna, Debbie Combs, Wendy Richter, one or two other ladies I can't think of. Completely buried her. I can't remember any female wrestler saying anything good about her. The Iron Sheik buries her as well. I thought she was the drizzling shits in the ring in the 80s. I have no desire to watch any more of her matches, so I haven't gone back and researched her more thoroughly to watch her skills. I can only imagine they're not very good. So she was in a political position. She basically owned and controlled the female wrestlers. Why they had her up there, why she had the belt, that's the reason. And for some reason, Vincent Mancini seemed to want to take care of her. Yeah, I have absolutely nothing nice to say about her. The Four Horsemen are in there, and for some reason, Iron Anderson is the picture here. But it's not the entire run of the Four Horsemen. It is, and I'm just doing this off memory. It's Iron, Tully, Ric Flair, and Barry Windham, not Ollie Anderson. So, and that was a political thing. Ollie Anderson was the Booker of Georgia Championship Wrestling. Georgia Championship Wrestling was eventually bought out by Vince McMahon. And Georgia Championship Wrestling was the biggest promotion. There were a few times when WWE wasn't the biggest, and Georgia Championship Wrestling got on TBS, and they got that big TV behind them early on, and then they started going to other places, and they were probably the biggest wrestling entity for a while. Vince McMahon ended up getting their TV, and well, there were some some big problems. I think there's a shoot like '84 where Ollie's just going nuts on Vince McMahon, and this is all real stuff, and it has not been forgotten or forgiven. So, in an act of childishness, Ollie not in there. Ollie clearly deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, despite whatever else you want to bring out the negative knocks. I mean, the man was a goddamn Black Scorpion, Sting, which is a terrible Black Scorpion impersonation. But yeah, he did the voice of Black Scorpion. He was original Horseman, Minnesota Wrecking Crew, NWA World Tag Team Champions when that meant something. He he did a lot of stuff. But if we break down the other ones, Barry Windham, definitely top 5 all-time workers in terms of smoothness. He was unbelievably smooth in the ring, and he was like a legit 6'5". His moves just looked so good. He had no charisma. He had no mic skills. He had no in the ring ability to get the fans vocally involved in his matches. There were a lot of problems in Barry Windham in terms of being a whole package. He didn't have a good physique. He was tall. He had not a big size to him, but he wasn't small or scrawny either. The kind of guy that needed a manager. But, I mean, that lariat, that belly to back suplex, that suplex float over, the superplex off the top, the claw, everything he did looked amazing. He was incredible in the ring, and an amazing hand, I would probably say. On his own merits, he had a bad WWF run. He had a little period he took off. All of his WWE, well, bad. I think he had 2 or maybe 3. And they were very non-memorable. His WCW NWA stuff was much better. He never actually got the World Heavyweight title, which I'm not going to go into that story, but that hinders him in terms of credentials. So he's another. I'd overall probably have to say he probably doesn't. If we're going to watermark Booker T, he probably doesn't make it. If we look at the other guys, Tully Blanchard by himself definitely doesn't make it. Outside of being Arn Anderson's tag team partner, he wasn't impressive. The guy was, if he's lucky, 5'10", 200 and maybe 10 pounds, 15 pounds at most, and that was being slightly out of shape. He didn't have an impressive physique, wasn't strong. His mic skills were better than Barry Windham's, not impressive, not memorable. I'm not like, man, look at that Tully Blanchard. Let me show you this Tully Blanchard interview. It was amazing. Didn't really get the fans involved. Did a slingshot suplex. It's okay. I don't know. I could definitely think of 1,000 wrestlers that are better than Tully Blanchard. So, by himself, a Hall of Famer now. Arn Anderson, on the other hand, is a guy that legitimately could have been a World Heavyweight Champion. He was incredibly good. He had a better size, a better build than any of the early Horsemen. I think Ole was technically the biggest, but definitely not a better build than Anderson. He had that sort of Larry Zbyszko, Bruno Sammartino sort of build. Not as big as Sammartino, but that old school medicine ball sort of build. Anderson, great promo guy. Now, I grew up in Virginia. I saw NWA before I saw anything else. Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, the Crockett's, and Anderson was there fairly recently after I started watching it. I was watching it before he came in there, but he was a huge part of it there, and he cut fantastic promos, intelligent promos. He was, it's sort of, his promos were sort of like what Nick Bockwinkel thought his promos were. Great. Flair's promos were really flamboyant, over the top, and his mic work was maybe better than Iron's. I don't know. They were both phenomenal mic workers, and I would put Iron probably as a top 25 mic worker of all time. He had the tag belts many times, and in WWF he had the TV belt many times, and that belt meant something. He had I don't know if he ever had the US belt, but he was an incredible talent, and I definitely see him by himself being in the Hall of Fame. I might be a little biased there, but his in the ring work was superb. Next on the list is Freddie Blassie. Freddie Blassie, I remember he was on some TV shows. He did the whole vampire deal. He was a manager later in his career. He was quite old, but he had a strong professional wrestling career out in California and other territories. He's another guy that seems worthy of that. I didn't mention Flair. Flair obviously deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, he's a top 10 all time guy. You can't, you know. Blassie, another guy, deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm not as familiar with his career as I could be, but I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised if there's maybe even any of you out there watching that maybe someone that's really old that would know more about Blassie than I do. And yeah, I mean, I think he deserves to be there. The next guy on the list, Terry Funk. Oh, actually, it says the Funks. Well, maybe Terry Funk gets it by himself. Clicking this, I want to see. Is it the father? Okay, it's just Terry. It's just Terry and Dory Jr. It's not Dory Sr. as well, I guess. Now, Terry and I don't know why they put them in there. Well, maybe both of them have been in there, and this is just to conserve room. I'm not exactly sure, but Terry Funk and Dory Funk Jr. were both NWA heavyweight champions for a long period of time. Terry Funk was also an ECW heavyweight champion. I want to say 95, maybe 96. He is, to say someone, Hogan drew the most money of anyone ever. And don't tell me, oh, it was Austin. It wasn't. Austin drew money for a very small period of time. And I also remember when people were seeing those 316 shirts, they saw another shirt that said NWO. That was Hogan. And Hogan drew money on top as a top main eventer for 20 years. Austin drew money on top as a top main eventer for, 3 years? You know, it's nowhere near comparison. Hogan, by that standard, would be the all-time greatest professional wrestler. If you go by any other standard, of who the all-time greatest professional wrestler is, his name is Terry Funk. By any other standard. Terry Funk is the best performer in professional wrestling, outside of being marketed, being pushed up, having that tremendous charisma to sell tickets. And Terry Funk did sell tickets. Terry Funk was a main eventer. Let's not make any mistake about that. Terry Funk was a main eventer in Japan. Terry Funk was a main eventer all over the territories. Terry Funk was a main eventer as a world champion in the NWA. Terry Funk was a main eventer in ECW at 53, I want to say, as a world champion in ECW. Terry Funk was incredibly talented, and he was also in Roadhouse. So, I mean, that alone merits Hall of Fame, doesn't it? Terry Funk was tremendous. Terry Funk, at times, has been my favorite professional wrestler, and he is, by I said any other standard, the best professional wrestler. If you want to argue that, don't. Just go watch some of those matches, and if you don't see it at first, just keep watching them, because you plain and simple don't know what you're talking about, and I won't entertain. That's just being foolish. This guy, I want to say when he's 47, he taught himself how to moonsault. This guy would do barbed wire hardcore matches, and he could go in and turn in scientific gems that would make Kurt Henning's head spin. He could sell, and the most important thing ever, I remember watching professional wrestling in 1989, the NWA, when he came in with at the tail end of the Ric Flair. In fact, the very last match of the Ric Flair Ricky Steamboat feud, when Ric Flair lost the belt and then won the belt back from Ricky Steamboat, and Steamboat turned Ric Flair babyface. And at the end of the match, Terry Funk's in the ring going, "Oh golly, Ric Flair, I'd like to have a shot at you." And Ric Flair goes, "Oh, you have to go earn a shot." He goes, I was just kidding you, Flair. I'm old and washed up. I couldn't take you on there as a champion. I just want to shake your hand and say I respect you." And he kind of blows Funk off a little bit, and he shakes his hand and goes, "Oh, okay, whatever." And then Funk goes ballistic. He goes crazy. He beats the living hell out of Ric Flair, takes him and pile drives him on a table. Not on the kind of goofy table they have, on a real table. For real, I think. Pile drove Ric Flair. And it was amazing. I'd never seen anything like that. And then they brought in Gary Hart. And they had Funk. And I looked at them and I said, Gary Hart is evil. And I know that, I'm 12 when this is happening in 89. And I go, well, I know that professional wrestling isn't real. I've seen 3 Ric Flair matches. I've seen masked wrestlers. I've known since I was very young professional wrestling isn't real. No one ever needed to tell me that. But Someone needed to tell Terry Funk that because this guy thought it was real. That's how convincing he was. That's how amazing his promos were. That's how you could see in the eyes and the evil and the hate and the seething and the desire. He said, that guy's going to go in there. He's going to hurt Ric Flair. He's going to pile drive Ric Flair. He's going to break Ric Flair's neck. He's going to take the belt. He's going to be the world champion. And Gary Hart knows it's not real. But Gary Hart's not going to tell Terry Funk because he's an evil son of a bitch. And Terry Funk thinks it's real. And it's going to be real when Terry Funk gets in there with Ric Flair. And it was amazing seeing the psychology that Terry Funk had. His psychology is the best of any professional wrestler that's ever wrestled. His repertoire of moves, his ability to adapt to styles, his ability to do everything from a match with no people in there with Jerry Lawler in a main event. And he was willing to lay down. He was willing to put the other person over. He didn't need, and that's what pushed him down. His willingness to do the work, the job, to do the favor, to make the match the best in an era where people were very selfish. And Terry Funk should have, at the culmination of that, gotten the World Belt. I was furious when he lost that I Quit match to Banana Nose Ric Flair. Terry Funk, way so much better than Ric Flair. It's ridiculous. And again, outside of the drawing figures number, Terry Funk, hands down, by an enormous amount, the best professional wrestler of all time. And so, on my list, Terry Funk is probably number one. We're going top 100, top 10, top 15. Terry Funk is probably in the top one. So, unless you want to go by drawing money, then, we might have to put Hogan and Austin up there. It's difficult when you're doing different formulas. But Terry Funk was amazing. And again, NWA champion, a champion in Japan, a champion in many territories, a champion in ECW as the world champion. And I believe he even held the WWE tag team belts with Cactus Jack when he came back as Chainsaw Charlie, which was a dumb idea, but whatever. It got Terry Funk in there. Got Terry Funk, Cat Jack as a tag team WWF, and I was like, yes. When I saw that come out, Mean Gene Okerlund. Yeah, I mean, I guess whatever. George Steele. George Steele was continuously a teacher while he was doing the deal. I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna be honest. He was a character. He'd bite turnbuckles, and I could get into this whole deal. I know a lot about George Steele. He was in was it Plan 9 from Outer Space? So he was in that as Tor, whatever. I don't know. It was a bad movie. He is a teacher. He's a really bright guy. Interesting gimmick. Hall of Famer. No, he was just in WWE. If you put a guy like George Steele in there, there are hundreds. The fact that if you don't have Dick Murdoch, you can't have George Steele. Also, I noticed that Gary Hart, who I mentioned before, all-time greatest professional manager by an enormous margin. He's so much better than Bobby the Brain Heenan or Jim Cornette, which would probably be 2 and 3. Unless maybe you put Skandar Akbar in there too. I don't know. But Gary Hart, tremendous. Not in here because he wasn't a WWE guy. Gerald Briscoe, another guy. I'm going to go with no. Jack Briscoe, NWA World Champion. Jack Briscoe. Gerald Briscoe's by himself. The Funks are together. The Funks both vastly better than Gerald Briscoe. Both NWA Heavyweight Champions. Gerald Briscoe, NWA Tag Team Champion. A number of regional belts. NWA World Junior Champion. And, he was just a stooge. He was in the WWE as an office guy. Being an office guy in the WWE, to me, doesn't merit a tremendous amount of additional incentive to put someone in the Hall of Fame. Gordon Sully, considered by many to be the greatest announcer of all time. He does not make my list as greatest announcer. He's probably, I don't know, he's top 10, maybe number 5. Many people who know very little about professional wrestling call Jim Ross the greatest announcer of all time, which is, well, just a sign that you don't know very much about professional wrestling. Gorgeous George Wagner, who that man loved to eat steak, and that man did have a heart attack. I think when he was 47 or 49. He was basically the inventor of the gimmick in terms of the non-monstrous gimmick, the flamboyant gimmick, the homosexual gimmick, the pretty boy gimmick. All that goes back to Wagner. Goldust to Shawn Michaels to Stan Lane to Steve Kearns to I could go on and on and on and on and on. And of course, guys more directly did it, like an Adrian Street or an Adrian Adonis, directly more basing off Gorgeous George. Obviously, Gorgeous George was the United States champion. Never put the belt on him, the world belt, because he was a character. He was a sports entertainer. Maybe the prototypical first sports entertainer, the grandfather of sports entertainment. Gorgeous George was an enormous draw, and his matches, aren't bad. They're not bad. He has strong psychology, does his character well. Not bad matches. Does he make the top 100 all time? Absolutely. Is he Hall of Famer? Absolutely. Next, and this might surprise people, very likely going to be my number one all-time announcer, and that is Gorilla Monsoon. Gorilla Monsoon also beat Muhammad Ali up, so yeah, there's that. Which you might be able to find that on YouTube. Yeah, it was pretty impressive. Gorilla Monsoon was like a 400-pounder. He was, hell, they call a part of the backstage area the Gorilla position after Gorilla Monsoon. Gorilla Monsoon was an amazing announcer. Gorilla Monsoon was an incredibly intelligent man. He was a very good professional wrestler as well, a main eventer. Definitely a Hall of Famer. And he was a part owner, all sort of thing. The Grand Wizard, he was a New York manager. That's all. Does he belong in the Hall of Fame? No. Gorilla Monsoon, if I didn't say, definitely belongs there. The Grand Wizard, definitely not. What was it? Ernie Roth or Rothstein or something like that. I thought he was a terrible mic worker. I don't know why he was an announcer, or excuse me, a manager. I mean, you could have just pulled two drunk guys off the first row and they could have done as good a job as a Grand Wizard. Why they put him with Superstar Billy Graham, I will not know, because Superstar Billy Graham is arguably a big argument, but he is arguably up for a best promo of all time. Why you would let a bad manager waste some of his precious time, I don't know. Greg the Hammer Valentine. Greg the Hammer Valentine is in here. He is somehow Greg the Hammer Valentine is somehow on here. And when I was a little kid, we would get these wrestling videotapes, and some of them would only be an hour long. And I'd always get excited when I go down, because I didn't have cable until I was 12. So we'd have like an hour of wrestling on, of WCW or NWA. And then an hour of like WWF, maybe if we were lucky, and then Saturday Night's Main Event would come on sometimes. And the WWF would have to go way up the UHF dial, and that would be staticky and just terrible. And like for like a year, Glow was on, and I'd watch that because I loved professional wrestling so much. I was starved for it. Not like now, where I'd probably go turn the TV on right now, and professional wrestling's on one of those channels. But there would always goddamn well be a Tito Santana versus Greg Valentine match on those damn tapes. Oh, you have no idea how disappointing. And they would go on forever. It'd be like a 60-minute tape, and like 47 minutes of the tape would be Greg Valentine versus Tito Santana. Greg Valentine absolutely sucks. He sucked when I was a kid. He sucked when I was a teenager. I liked to see him in WCW every once in a while because they beat the shit out of him, and I know that was pissing him off because he thought he was better than a jobber. The guy looks like he got hit in the face with a fucking shovel. I used to call him the Trailer Park Mom. He had the most boring hold ever. I despise Greg Valentine matches. I hate watching him wrestle. I used to be in E-Fed, which, it's like a role-playing game for wrestling, where you write out these storylines and book and stuff. And I got a hold of Greg Valentine on my roster. I know, man, the things I did with him. I had him living in a homeless shelter. It was amazing. And the guys that like Greg Valentine, man, I got heat. Greg Valentine. If Greg Valentine belongs in there, put Mike Sharp in there. You'd have to let 99.9% of people who've ever wrestled be in the Hall of Fame if Greg Valentine is in there. Greg Valentine, that's pathetic. It's pathetic he had a job in professional wrestling. I heard, I've not seen much of his father, and his father was just as boring as him. And I have, as Bob Backlund would say, I have abomination for the fact Greg Valentine is in here. We're going to have to look and see if I can find anyone that I object more towards being in the Hall of Fame than Greg Valentine. I know for some foolish reason they put belts on him. I don't know if he had pictures of someone. I don't know how Greg Valentine ever got any belts. He had that methodical style. He was boring as hell. I could think of hundreds and hundreds of guys who are more fit, who are better in every way than Greg Valentine. Greg Valentine absolutely sucked. He had a terrible promo. His in-ring work was boring. He was like Ric Flair with no charisma, no mic skills, no in-ring ability, an unwillingness to sell. His body was very very poor to look at. Like maybe he had conditioning or whatever, but his face, he had that enormous forehead. And he's wearing what looks like a reject Terry Taylor robe. Terrible. Hacksaw Jim Duggan, another guy to me, doesn't make the Hall of Fame, but not by much. He's just sort of under it. I really liked his WCW stuff, which I think he didn't like. But when he was the janitor and he found the TV belt in the garbage can, I popped like a motherfucker for that. That was some of the, and I think that was Russo, and I think that was some of the best WCW stuff at that period I'd seen. It was incredible stuff. I laughed and laughed and laughed. I thought that was so funny when he was the janitor, and of course he's part of the Rack Pack in Mid South Championship Wrestling with Matt Bourne and with Ted DiBiase. He did the good guy. He was a bad guy then, well, for most of the period. I'd gone in for a while, but I personally never thought Duggan was much. He didn't have a good body. He was physical size, but he didn't have the good body. He was big, but not big enough to be big. If you get what I'm saying in terms of wrestling, he his moves were, he wasn't really smooth in the ring. I don't know. I saw him. I think he was lucky to keep staying in the position because he was a territory guy that got snapped up when Vince was picking up all the territory guys. And to me, that's really all he was. He was a main eventer in a territory on the WWE stage. I thought, and I was whenever he'd be on, I'd be like, it's Jim Duggan. I guess I got to watch this match. It wasn't like Valentine, like where I was actually literally angry, and I don't think that he had heat. He had that we call it X-Pac heat. I was like, God, maybe I'll just watch golf. It was a misery. Greg Valentine's a misery. I hate shit, Greg Valentine. Next guy on the list is Harley Race. Harley Race, obviously the 7-time NWA World Champion. They brought him to WWE and did nothing with him. Put the crown on him, had him fight Haku, which Haku was a badass, but yeah, does Harley Race deserve to be in there? Absolutely. Space Odyssey 2001, the music that Ric Flair comes out to is actually originally Harley Race's music. Flair stole that from him. Harley Race was considered a legit badass at Fresh Wrestling, and again, he held the belt 7 times. I think he lost the belt to, maybe Flair lost the belt to Von Erich. I know he lost the belt to Tommy Rich. He lost the belt to Flair and to Dusty. I want to say he originally won the belt from Dory Funk Jr. and lost it to Terry the first time he lost it. Anyway, he obviously deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He was very talented. High Chief Peter Maivia, that's again a political thing. He is the Rock's grandfather, and I believe that's probably the only reason he's in there. Yes, he did. He had, I think, one main event at Madison Square Garden against Bruno, and he ran the Hawaii territory. Not really all that impressive. Howard Finkel. I mean, I don't know. He had a good voice for ring announcer. Definitely better than Chimmel and William Garcia. It's hard to say. I mean, does a ring announcer deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? I don't know. No. Next on the list, Hulk Hogan. This is funny who's beside Hulk Hogan. Well, you know something, dude. Hogan. Obviously. He is. He's Hulk Hogan. Obviously, in the Hall of Fame. If you don't put him in there, it's just ridiculous. Next, right beside Hulk Hogan. That's right, Baba. It's the Iron Sheik from Tehran, Iran, the oldest country in the world. You're a motherfucker. And I hate you. Iron Sheik. Obviously, anyone that watches my channel knows that I love the Iron Sheik. I love the Iron Sheik. Hassan Saudi. One of my all-time favorites. And I'm not going to do too much Iron Sheik. You can watch the, probably any of my videos to see some Iron Sheik impersonations with the Within the Ring of Fire video I did with the Iron Sheik review Within the Ring of Fire, which was funny for me to do. Love, and I can't do it very good right now. I'm very nasally, as you could tell. But love the Iron Sheik. In fact, the outfit he's in there with I have that same Iron Sheik figure. I bought it for my kid, but I really play with him when he does. And he'll sit there, Dad, I'm playing the Iron Sheik. And I'm like, the Iron Sheik. The Iron Sheik, like, fight whatever. Like, he's completely indestructible. Just like Salto and Superman. Like, yeah, it's your bro, it's Superman. You break my heart, and now I break your back, and then make you humble. But I love the Iron Sheik. Obviously, Iron Sheik deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He won the belt from Backlund and kickstarted Hulk Hogan with that match. He was big star there. However, at the end of his career, he was a jobber as what is it, Colonel Mustafa with Sergeant Slaughter. He came back after just being a straight jobber. Like, I don't know. I'm not even sure they gave him music, but he come out. Well, maybe they did because I think he came out with the Iranian flag. But he was a straight up jobber in WCW. I think he was really messed up on drugs at the time too. But classic, entertaining. Rebuilt himself on the internet, on the Howard Stern show, through a lot of different medium, through shoot interviews, and has really become he's probably the number one shoot interview guy. Yeah, he'd have to be, and maybe Honky Tonk number two, maybe Raven number two. You know, Iron Sheik is amazing, incredibly funny. If he had done that stuff instead of being the generic Persian bad guy, he would have been like a billionaire. You'd be like Hulk who? You'd be like, I'm a fan of the Iron Sheik. Fuck you, jabroni. You know, if he was doing that, if if he broke up his back and made him humble, and fucked his ass in Madison Square in '84, that would have been fucking amazing. He called him a fucking jabroni and spit on him. I love the Iron Sheik. I think he's amazingly entertaining, and I think he was held back by being this generic bad guy. He should have been a baby face, a top baby face, and I think he could have drawn an enormous. I mean, you look at what he did as a broken down old man and the entertainment value he provided. All of that is entertainment. All that would translate on a wrestling show. If he'd been born 10 years later, you know, he would have been really phenomenal. You know, he would have been an Attitude Era guy. If he was born 10 years later, obviously, even then, he'd been on the tail end. But the amount of charisma he has, I think he'd go Raku. I mean, this guy was just absolutely phenomenal. Next guy on the list, Ivan Putski. If Ivan Putski wasn't a WWE guy, he wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. He's and of course he has his son Scott Putski. But he was in that same category with Duggan. Duggan is in the Hall of Fame because he's a WWE guy. If he hadn't been, he wouldn't be. Same thing for Putski. Jack Briscoe, NWA World Heavyweight Champion, NWA World Tag Team Champion, his brother Jerry Briscoe, immortalized in an ICP song. I'm sure that's a big accomplishment for him. Jack Briscoe. His interviews were the shits. At least I think they were. I was listening to some watching some Georgia Championship Wrestling from '81, '83 recently. And yeah, he was. Wow, his interviews were just freaking horrible. He's like, Road Warriors, we're wrestlers, you're brawlers, and we're gonna take the leg, and that's gonna be it. It was really really bad. Now I clicked on something to click back there. Next, Jake the Snake Roberts. Jake the Snake Roberts. I really just like that a large portion of his WWE career was spent as a babyface. That guy was a heel, and as a heel, he was amazing. I love when he came into WCW, but the problems with Watts and whatever. When he had the Cobra, when he went after Sting, when he had the Cobra in WWE, when he went after Macho, it was amazing. You know, his stuff with the Undertaker. I mean, Jake the Snake Roberts was phenomenal. Considered one of the all-time best interviews. He had the snake gimmick. He had very good work. He could sell, and he was always his matches from a psychological standpoint made so much sense. So many wrestlers have terrible psychology. If you're in a wrestling match, particularly if it's not this huge feud or whatever, you're trying to do one thing, and that is win. And that's what Jake Roberts' matches were. Watch his matches constantly trying to hook the DDT, constantly trying to hook the DDT. Watch how many times people avoid it during the match. Because he's trying to win. He's going for that cover. He wants to win the match. Psychologically speaking, that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. James Dudley, he was a promoter at a DC, I think. I know very little about him. Whatever. Jerry Lawler, he had a lot of big feuds, big legendary angles, the Andy Kaufman stuff. Yeah, a lot of stuff with Superstar, Bill Dundee. He was pretty much USWA. He was, I want to say he was the half owner. I think actually he became the full owner by the end of it. When Memphis USWA became really the prototype of what their Ohio Valley and Florida are now. Yeah, that's where they were sending guys. That's where guys were being groomed, and everybody came through there. Men on a Mission, the Truth Commission, The Rock, go over and over again, the guy after guy after guy after guy that was there. And Jerry Lawler was so he was a promoter, he was a booker, he was an announcer, he was an AWA World Heavyweight Champion. He was in some very big matches. The one he had with Kerry Von Erich was when the Worlds Collide 3. Was that what it was called? Or no, Russell. I think it was Russell Rock 3. Whatever. And that was interesting when Memphis switched from recognizing the NWA champion as their champion to the AWA, and then they put the belt on Lawler, so which made sense to go that way. He had a lot of big matches in the WWF. He wrestled Michael Cole, WrestleMania. He had the Kiss Your Foot match with Bret Hart. He did a lot of stuff. He had a good career. I could knock him left, right, and center. There's a lot of bad aspects to him as a person, as a performer, but a lot of good too. And is he better than Booker T? Absolutely. So I'm gonna apologize. My impersonations aren't quite as good as they as they typically are. But the next man was a fighter, a governor. I'm talking about Jesse Ventura. There is a parody of Jesse Ventura on YouTube that you have to watch about his conspiracy theory shows, the conspiracy of wrestling fake, and it has him and there's a guy doing the Iron Sheik. The guy doing him is phenomenal. It is. In fact, I'm going to watch it when I'm done with this. It is one of the funnier things I have ever seen. And if you know Askelette, a lot of times he and I were in chats. You can check him out at Goth Nog. We'll sit there. We'll just do Jesse Ventura. We'll just laugh and laugh and laugh. Jesse Ventura is amazingly entertaining. I love Jesse Ventura, and he's an atheist, but he's also probably the most pompous asshole in the history of the world. But he was a governor, and he's crazy. So, please don't sue me, Jesse. And I love Jesse. I think he was the best heel announcer ever. I think he was the best color man ever. A little limited in WCW because he had to work with Giovanni and Ross, and they just both did a very bad job with him. He was amazing I think him and Monsoon are my favorite announce team ever, but him and Vince McMahon were also very, very, very good. You got to watch some of him and Vince and some of him and Gorilla Monsoon, and you're gonna be blown away at how much better either of those combinations are than Ross and Jerry Lawler or any 90s up combination outside of maybe Joey Styles and what the hell was the Joel Gertner. They were very, very good in ECW. Joey Styles, Harlem, WWE, but very good in ECW. Jim Ross, he had a lot of high up jobs there. So I kind of see why they put him in. He was originally started. I have seen probably very close to all. I've probably seen at least 90. I'm going to say I've probably seen 90% of the matches Jim Ross has ever called. So that puts me in a position where I am well familiar with him. He started in Mid-South, and him and Boyd Pearson would alternate eventually, week to week. He started there, I think, as the I think he actually started as a referee and then came the ring announcer, and then started doing the shows, and then became the announcer in UWF with Michael P.S. Hayes would be there. Particularly, he came over to NWA Crockett when the UWF merger went through. He would announce with Giovanni or with Bob Connell or with Dave Crockett, and I thought that was really more of his better stuff there. The UWF and he was even good in Mid-South to that Mid-Atlantic stuff. His early WWF stuff was good. His later WWF stuff after he started having the strokes was not good. In the middle there, he went and worked a little bit for Smoky Mountain Championship Wrestling. Yeah, to me, Jim Ross is probably the most overrated announcer ever. He was also, a big time boss up there in the WWF, and he was a booker in WCW in the booking committee with Ric Flair, with some other guys. I'm very tired at the moment, so I don't quite recall. But he was their announcer for a long time. Does he belong in the Hall of Fame? I'll go ahead and give him a yes. Next on the list, Jimmy Hart. You might like Jimmy Hart, but I sure don't. I thought he sucked. Maybe in terms of the things he did in the backstage. He was with the Gentrys. He had a big time hit song back in, I want to say, the late 50s, maybe the 60s. Uh, I don't know, the 70s. I don't know. At some point he had one. He did music. I'm not sure exactly what his discography or credits are there, but in terms of what he did in WCW and WWF in that capacity, I thought was a horrible announcer, not announcer. He would have made a horrible announcer, but horrible a manager. He came out of Memphis. He was a manager there, and I thought not particularly good. I wasn't a fan of his there. Not a fan of his in WWF. Not a fan of his in WCW. I thought he added absolutely nothing. I thought he was irritating. Not enough. Well, when it gets you, you have heat kind of way. And can you go away now? Can you and Greg Valentine just go away? Um, Jimmy Snuka, next on the list, obviously a Hall of Famer, obviously a top 100 guy. This guy was enormous. This guy could easily have been a world champion. This guy, from what they say, got away with killing someone. So, yeah, Jimmy Snuka, Jimmy the Murderer Snuka. So, good for him, I guess. I don't know. But, yeah, you can go look at all that stuff, and he got busted with drugs and stuff like that, too. So he's crazy from what I understand. And he was almost the opposite of the Iron Sheik. Like the Iron Sheik is, 1,000 miles an hour. He's just so slow. Obie and Anthony used to do a funny bit back in very early 2000s with they'd play Iron Sheik and then they'd play Jimmy Snuka, and you know it was great stuff. Um, Snuka coming off the top of the cage, that was a big moment. He really revolutionized a lot of things. And Snuka wasn't a little guy. If you look at him, he was huge and really muscular. And he was never really one of my favorites, to be honest, to watch. But he was better than Tito Santana. um, better than Greg Valentine. Maybe even better than Hacksaw Jim Duggan in terms of who I want to watch. Johnny Rodz and the guy on there, absolutely not. No reason he should be in the Hall of Fame. He's like a jobber. Next on the list, Junkyard Dog. Now, if all you ever saw from Junkyard Dog was him with his huge cocaine habit and big fat gut in the WWF, I can see where you go, oh, Junkyard Dog wasn't very good. Or even later when his WWF career was over and he came to WCW with an even fatter gut and even more of a cocaine problem. Now he died, I want to say around '93, if I'm right, and I believe it was from drugs. But in Mid South, I'm looking at him now. God, his chest is flabby, his arms are nothing. This guy was jacked in Mid South. I remember watching him. I guess he was about 1980. He was the top guy in Mid South, and he eventually left Watson and went to Vince, who was buying everybody out. And he had a great build. He was about 280, and he came in with a one time on a heel, beat him in something, and he had to leave the territory, but he came back under the mask as Stagger Lee. Is it me or is it Stagger Lee? That was a great promo, or a great angle. What heel did that to him? Was it Dick Murdoch? I can't remember. Again, it's getting quite late here, so I don't know. But Junkyard Dog, I had a great time watching his stuff. The big thump in Mid South, that was his best stuff, hands down. He could still go a little bit. Never a good worker, never remotely good worker, but the fans loved him. Who that? Who that? Who that gonna beat that dog? Who that? Who that? Who that gonna beat that dog? So if you're from Louisiana, you know what I'm talking about. This guy sold out a lot of venues there. He sold out what the hell was the name? The Cajun Dome, and he was a top guy there, more so, and he was the North American champion there, more so than he didn't do that much in the WWE. Killer Kowalski, I actually rewatched probably for the third time his shoot interview. You find it the full shoot interview on YouTube, for Killer Kowalski. He was the guy who trained China and Triple H, with as well as others. He has been immortalized in many cartoons over the years, with a slight name change. He's a vegetarian and a kind of a weird guy. He's seems very intelligent and very, very talented. Definitely a Hall of Famer. Next on the list, Coco Beware. How this guy got in the Hall of Fame, you have to be kidding me. This guy was basically a jobber. He was the Black Brad Armstrong. No mic skills, nothing. He had a parrot and he had the Ghostbuster. And he could drop kick for a guy that, looked like a fairly tall dwarf. Yeah. So the fact he's in the Hall of Fame he's better than Johnny Rodz. And yeah. In terms of his career accomplishments, very little. I can go into what he did in Memphis. I can go into Mid-South. But, come on. Lita. I think Lita's really fucking hot. So there's that. I remember her breaking in ECW with Miss Congeniality. And again, I think she's really hot. There are certain aspects of her work I could knock. But at the same time, her and Trish Stratus had the best feud in women's wrestling history ever. They main evented Raw. And they deserved it. And I watched and I enjoyed it. They had a feud that went for years and years and years. And they were, it was great. She'd pull the shirt off with the sports bra. She'd do the moonsault. She had that youth culture. She was like the Hardy girl. And, I would definitely say she deserves to be in there. I would put her and Trish Stratus down as the top 1 and 2 female wrestlers in history. And next on the list is Mae Young, and that's ridiculous. She is on there because she comes out and takes her top off at like 412 years old. And no one wants to see that. Put those away. Next on the list, Maurice Mad Dog Vachon. Another guy does not deserve to be on there. He was like an AWA guy, a Canadian guy. He's a Canadian, French Canadian, but he would wrestle in there, and he was, he's another guy. Like if you put him in, he's in there, but Dick Murdoch isn't. Okay, doesn't deserve to be in there clearly. Neither does old Slappy Titties. Mae Young, definitely not. Maurice Mad Dog Vachon, no. Coco Beware, no. Mick Foley, the wrestler I look the most like, if you would see me back in the day. In fact, I went, it's Halloween one year, dressed up exactly like he is, and I had a picture, and everyone thought it was, in fact, Mick Foley. No one, oh, there's a picture of Mick Foley, you got a picture of Mick Foley here. Now take a better look. Why? What am I looking at this picture of Mick Foley for? Take a better look. I see it, it's Mick Foley. That's me. I used to have long hair, and Mick Foley. For a long period of time, Captain Jack was my favorite wrestler. We started on the corporate Foley thing. He went way down when he just started being Mankind, Mick Foley, or whatever. When he just started being Mick Foley, being the writer and doing the thumbs up and Foley is good. Oh, God, I got tired of him fast. His TNA stuff was abysmal, but I was glad he got to have the belt. His Japan stuff is amazing. His early WCW stuff is great. His ECW stuff is great. His stuff in Global was very good. I'm very familiar with his work. Even seen his old WWF job matches when he first was up there. Up to a point, he was my favorite for years. Cactus Jack was my favorite wrestler. When he would run on that apron and leapt out onto the aisleway and drove that elbow deep into a man's very soul, I looked at him. Oh my God! I'd never seen anything like that. It revolutionized. It might seem not that big a thing now, but it's like 89, maybe 90, And this is before FMW. This is before Big Japan. This is before ECW. This is, not Yokohama Deathmatch. This was WCW or NWA, when everything was sterile and da-da-da. And this guy was doing crazy stuff. Taking backdrops on the floor and doing things that were finishes. And, that elbow, that running elbow, and we would run and just kamikaze, and oh man, his stuff was great. I loved watching his stuff there. He blew my mind, and he was another guy that came off as very realistic. I like guys that seem very real. Another guy I see not on the list here is Dr. Death Steve Williams. There's no reason he shouldn't be on there. He was amazing, and I bet there's. Bruiser Brody wasn't on the list. How are those two guys not in the Hall of Fame? And Coco Beware is. What imbecile, as the person putting this together, never seen professional wrestling outside of New York or WWE? You gotta be kidding me. Mike Tyson, celebrity, whatever. Mil Mascaras, he protected his gimmick, he protected himself, he protected his mask. I've seen his matches before. I wish I could be protected from them. He sucked. I don't know. Does he belong there? He was a big Mexican legend. By all accounts, he's a complete asshole. By my accounts from watching his matches, he sucked. Um, One name value on how he protected himself and how he always got over wins. From a in the ring factor, if it was a shoot, then yes. If it doesn't work, next guy, the $1 Million Man. He's a bubbler to me. I've seen him. I've seen a lot of Ted's work. His stuff in Mid South. His stuff in Georgia. I don't know. He never, in terms of titles, held a lot of regional belts, but he was never a world champion, which is a problem for adding the credentials. You know, it's like not winning the Super Bowl or not winning a World Series ring or whatever. And he kind of had a bit of a stint as sort of a managerish type of guy. His run in, of course, he had a run as a tag team with Mike Rotunda, IRS, Bray Wyatt's father. I don't know. He's maybe. A lot of people really are big fans of Ted DiBiase. I never was. I think he's good, but not great. Mr. T, of the celebrities I have in there, I would probably actually put him as number one in terms of being worthy of being in there. He's the main event of WrestleMania 1, and of course fought Piper and Ward to settle the score. And I see no problem with Mr. T being there for enough celebrities. Next on the list is Mr. Fuji. I don't know why he was a manager. He could barely speak English. That never made sense to me. I guess they wanted to have him in some position, and maybe they were scared of what kind of ribs he was going to pull on them. Fuji, in my mind, shouldn't have even been there, let alone in the Hall of Fame. It appears if you were a manager in the WWE, you get to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, all of them, for what I'm saying, were in there. Except Jim Cornette, who was a very good manager. So, I don't know. Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig, absolutely. He was fantastic. I mean, no, Kurt Hennig was perfect. The best stuff he did in his career was, I thought the rap is crap stuff when he led the West Texas Rednecks. That was phenomenal. They could not keep that shirt in stock. It was selling so fast. It was amazing. In the face of some of the worst booking I've ever seen, they had the rappers, No Limit Soldiers and whatnot, were the good guys. They were the faces. And they 15-on-1 beat Kurt Hennig down, which is the most grotesque heel move I've ever seen in professional wrestling. I don't think they ever actually made Kurt Hennig's group good guys. Like, they still kept them in bad guys, but they were huge baby faces working out of the heel locker room, but they were beloved. Their song was fantastically funny. Oh, rap is crap. Oh, I hate rap. That was funny, man. That's wrestling comedy done right. I thought he was great. The son of Larry the Axe. Hennig, the father of what's Ryback's partner name? Curtis Hennig, or I don't know, whatever his name is. He's not very good as a kid so far. Maybe he'll get better at some point. I remember watching AWA where I first became aware of him when he was very young. And he was teaming with his father, taking on the Road Warriors in a feud on an old AWA tape I had back in the day. It was like a half-hour tape, and it cost $10. When I was a kid, 10 freaking bucks for a half-hour tape. I there were 4 of them, and I bought all 4 of them. That meant for 2 hours of wrestling. They weren't even a full half hour. If you could believe, a tape that wasn't even half an hour long. It had bumpers and all kinds of crap on there. And I think even with all that, it was still just under a half an hour each of the tapes. So they had like the Road Warriors, they had Sergeant Slaughter, they had classic AWA heavyweight matches, they had classic tag team matches. A lot of the matches were like cut, too, which sucked. And I had all 4 of them. That was a little collection. $40 for 2 hours. $40 by like 1985 prices for 4 hours or for 2 hours of wrestling. God, I mean, what a ripoff. But I remember him on there, and the Road Warriors were my team, and they beat the fuck out of him, and I liked that. And I watched those tapes over and over and over again. For a long period of time, I could verbatim. In fact, the Sergeant Slaughter interview on the Sergeant Slaughter tape, I think I can still do verbatim from memory, and I haven't seen the tape in probably over 20 years. Next on the list is Nick Bockwinkel. I never thought Bockwinkel was good. He was AW World Champion. I see why you put him in there. I never thought he was good. I just thought he looked like, a poor man's Ric Flair. And he did not have the mic work of Ric Flair. I mean, in the ring, he looked like a poor man's Ric Flair. And he did not have anywhere near the charisma or mic work of Flair. Still, he was a whole lot better than watching Vern Gagne, who looked like, he was like Walking Dead when I went about. Nikolai Volkov. Here's another guy. There was 0% chance he should have been in the Hall of Fame. I don't know what the criteria is. You were in the 80s. You were a member of the WWE. I don't know. Am I going to go and see Mike Sharp in here soon? Where's the cutoff line? Nikolai Dime Volkov, to me, was... first of all, he was unbelievably... In the 80s, he's probably the worst wrestler in terms of being technical. I mean, you could probably find Nick Goulas or something like that, or George Goulas, and say, well, that guy's worse. And you could probably find 10 other guys, but Nikolai Volkov was horrible. I remember watching him in Mid-South. He was actually legitimately from Russia, like one of the satellite countries that got absorbed in the USSR. And no one believed it! He was legitimately from her, and no one believed it. So, Nikolai Volkov was in here, but Nikita Koloff is not. Nikita Koloff was the one guy that people believed was Russian. And he was from Minnesota. Oh, you'll say, oh. And he would, in the way they built him up, he'd be stalking in the background. Then he would learn real Russian words, and he would say, just spout a couple off. That would be all he'd do in the promo. And he'd go down to the gym, and he'd kayfabe. And he'd go, he'd say a couple words in Russian and act like he'd understand him, and he would just go in the gym and work out for free. I mean, who the hell's going to tell that guy he's not going to get a workout? I'm sure not, and you weren't either in 1984. And I'm about to move here, go get up with a plug. So I apologize for our even shittier now production values. But we're just going to keep rocking and rolling, because that's how we do it here, baby. So Nikolai Volkov was an abysmal wrestler with no mic skills. Though he was big, he had a really shitty build. I would never believe he was from Russia. And again, that's the criteria there. There's no Magnum TA. There's no Nikita Koloff. I don't see him on here. But Nikolai Volkov. I mean, that guy sucks. Pat Patterson. I was never really big on him. I'll do a video and really pick his style apart. A lot of people are really, really, really big on it. They go, oh, Patterson was this and that. But in terms of a booker, I don't know. I'm not there at the time when he was really booking things, laying things out. He's supposed to be very, very good. So I'll give him that. I haven't seen that much of his earlier stuff. So, and I don't know. I always remember not enjoying watching his matches. But does he belong there? First IC champion in a tournament in, what was it, Brazil or Argentina, I think. Yeah, okay. And it never happened, but whatever. For the overall contribution to booking things. And I think booking, while just being a stooge and agent, stuff like that, I don't think really merits any consideration. Being a booker, being, head of creative, whatever you want to call it, I think does definitely merit. So Pat Patterson, I'm fine with. Nikolai Volkov, again, that's fucking ridiculous. And Fuji, that's also, it's like, come on now. A manager I do agree with, though, in here is, Percival Pringle III, otherwise known to WWE fans as Paul Bearer. He was in Global. He was in a lot of different territories as Percy Pringle. He was a manager, yes. Well before he was Paul Bearer. And he did that character wonderful. Percy Pringle was a different character. He wrestled a little bit too. I have no problem with that. He's definitely better than Jimmy Hart. Definitely better than the Grand Wizard. Definitely better than, there's another manager in there. Fuji. And even another one there. I'd put him on there. I'd put, I don't know. He's up there somewhere. Another manager on there, Paul Ellering. Ellering was a manager of the LOD. And he was actually a wrestler. He actually had a great physique. In fact, I've been watching the Georgia Championship recently, and he was there. He was in there with the Road Warriors, up in AWA with the Road Warriors, in Mid South with the Road Warriors. He was in NWA with the Road Warriors, in Japan with the Road Warriors, and WWE with the Road Warriors. So, and I'm probably missing some territories as well. Paul Ellering was their manager, and because of that, he was a manager I really liked when I was younger. He would be in the War Games matches. He put like some studs on his hands, and I think he had an injury and why he became that. Why he became the manager, and he was with them. I think because they actually really needed a manager like for real, not like in the ring, but for real. Because I mean, you listen to their promos; they were good. Animal was good on the stick, and Hawk was fantastic. The worst guy in the promo was Paul Ellering. He was the worst guy on the mic for them, and I thought he overall made their promos, their interviews, their marketing worse in that regard. He managed a lot of other guys too, particularly in Georgia. He had a good stable. He was a Road Warriors manager, so I can't say he doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. That's how I'm going to leave it. Paul Orndorff is WrestleMania 1, his main event. He did a lot of big things in the WWF. I would say he deserves to be there. I never liked watching Paul Orndorff. I always kind of thought he sucked. And he looks like, I don't know if something's wrong with him now. I know he had the arm gimmick in WCW, the stinger in the neck and back atrophy to screw up. I think it's the left arm. But with that mustache he had and that gimmick when he came out in wrestling the other night, I mean, he looked, oh my God. Pedro Morales, he was a huge main eventer if you don't know anything about Pedro Morales. And he drew a lot of people, particularly in the Hispanic market, particularly the Puerto Ricans. And that was a big percentage in the New York area to draw, and you wanted to bring that audience in. So in the 70s, he worked for us in the 80s as well, early 80s, mid 80s. I think he retired. So he was a big draw, main eventer. So I would definitely put him in there. Pete Rose, I like the fact that he's in the WWE Hall of Fame. That he's in a Hall of Fame. That's I don't know if it's legitimate or big or whatever, but that appeals to some part of me. So, and he did take some tombstones from Kane. They whooped Pete Rose a few years in a feud with Kane. It was all right. So, of the celebrities, I'm more inclined towards him than some of the others. Next on the list, and I don't know why they called him Razor Ramon instead of Scott Hall, but it's the bad guy, Razor Ramon, and I ooze machismo, and I'm in the Hall of Fame, and Big Kev is in the Hall of Fame. I don't see the kid in the Hall of Fame. HBK, yeah, he's in the Hall of Fame. So I don't know how good that came out with the film I having, but I can do a dead on Scott Hall impersonation. One of my better wrestling impersonations. I am a huge fan of his, the drug problem and so forth. Even with all that, I still think he should have been multi-time world champion. He's about 1 billion times better than Dallas Page or Kevin Nash or almost anyone that was in the WCW roster, which was a lot of really talented people. He is incredibly talented. He's 6.5 foot tall, 260, probably. I don't know what he really weighed, but a great look, a big guy. Could bump, could sell, would work with you. He'd do the job for kid. He'd job for what's a Mexican guy? He'd job for Hector Garza. He got it. He was very intelligent, or is very intelligent, Scott Hall, and really an incredibly talented professional wrestler. You had to sack his shit, the razor's edge, the toothpick. He'd play to the crowd. He had he could come down and make the gestures. He'd hit the mic. Go, ow! It's time for a survey. Survey says, one more for the bad guys. So yeah, and of course the NWO was the biggest angle in the history of professional wrestling. He was the first member of NWO. He was the cinch pin. He was the guy that got it over. He was the worker. He was. And he's incredibly. If you don't really understand professional wrestling, you're not going to understand how good Scott Hall is. He was incredibly talented in the ring as a worker, and his in the ring work, I don't know. I mean, it's really high up there. Next on the list is Ric Flair, 16-time world champion. Great promos. I always thought his work kind of sucked, if I'm going to be honest. He was he should have been a WWF guy. Ric Flair is a sports entertainer. He's not a professional wrestler in the vein of the territories. And a lot of guys back then, had a lot of issues with that, a lot of problems with the fact that he basically exposed the business every other time he went out there and worked, or the second time you saw him work the same match he did the last time, and again 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 and again. And I've seen a lot of Ric Flair matches, or I've seen one of them. I don't know. Either way, sometimes he did a few different things, but it was the same thing over and over again. Whether he was wrestling a jobber, we should call weak guys, or he was wrestling Ricky Steamboat, who's the next guy on the list. But Flair, does he deserve to be there? Yes. Are his promos phenomenal? Yes. Is the segment where they're going musical chairs on Raw, when he's strutting around the chairs, one of the all-time 5 best things I've ever seen in professional wrestling. That was phenomenal. It was one of those things I had to stop because I was laughing so hard. Watch it again, kept laughing. Watch it again, kept laughing. Watching it. In fact, I probably need to watch it again. It's amazing. Ric Flair, gold in that regard, and he could suck the fans and get involved. No, and he looked at the fans and it'd sell and it'd bleed. He did a lot of good things. It was just it was too much repetition. He needed to be able to bend and do different things, and he didn't do that. A lot of positive things for him. I have to talk 10 minutes about it to get my full feelings on Ric Flair out, but he's not the all-time greatest in any way, shape, or form of professional wrestling. He didn't draw the most money. He's not the best known name, and he's certainly not the best professional wrestler in terms of, we've covered that. That's Terry Funk. His in-the-ring work. You just talking about Scott Hall. Scott Hall's hundreds of times better than Ric Flair in terms of his in-the-ring work. Ricky Steamboat. I always thought Ricky Steamboat was overrated. I'm just going to be honest. I didn't like him. I thought his matches were kind of boring, baby-facey. His stuff with Flair in '89 was the best stuff of his career. I enjoyed that. Chi-Town Rumble. I don't know. Don't kill me. I don't know. I found his match with Randy Savage forgettable. I saw it a long time ago. I saw it not that long ago, and then I saw it not all that long ago, and I still can't remember it. I think it was that did George Steele get involved at some point? I don't know. I can't remember. There WrestleMania 3, people herald as like the best WWF match ever, and I'm like, dude, there's so many matches that are so much better than that. I can go on and on and on with matches that are better than that. But Ricky Steamboat, does he deserve to be there? I would say yes. He's better than Booker T, barely. Like he's a guy that in my mind that should be on the bottom, like barely. Like Razor Ramon way up towards the top, Ric Flair way up towards the top. The Road Warriors, obviously the best tag team of all time, bar none. So you had to put them in there. Those guys could both of them could have been world champions. They were tag team wrestling, and they made tag team wrestling because they were so important. They were so big, And when they would come into a territory, it's oh no, it's the Road Warriors. That dun 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 dun. I'm still mad at Vince Russo for using the Iron Man song. That is the Road Warriors music. Rocky Johnson, another guy. He's in there because he's the Rock's father. First ever WWE Black Tag Team Champions with Tony Atlas. Who, by the way, those guys hate each other and hated each other at the time. Soul Man Rocky Johnson. I don't know. He's a guy that probably wouldn't be in there if it's. Then again, everybody that worked in the 80s in WWE is in there. So I don't know. Am I going to flip and see? Did I miss Frenchie Martin somehow? I don't know. Did I miss B. Brian Blair and Jim Brunzell? They don't seem to be in here. I don't know why. Jacques Rougeau and Raymond Rougeau, they're not in here. I don't know. The Mountie. Okay. Oh, you have a very strong. Okay, this whole page belongs in there. Roddy Piper, Hot Rod, obviously. I don't think I need to explain that one. They live. Hell came to Frogtown. Been watching him in Georgia. He did a lot of stuff outside of WWE, which you guys might not know. I don't just mean his brief WCW run where he run the US belt. He was, and not his movies either. He was in Mid Atlantic. He did with my buddy Greg Valentine, a dog collar match. He was over in Portland. He was in Georgia Champ. I didn't watch his Georgia Championship stuff recently. I want to say wrestled in Stampede. He wrestled up. I think he started. He's Canadian. He's not from Glasgow, Scotland. He was my favorite wrestler at one point too. Then he got old and he got coodish and he wasn't funny anymore, but he tried to still. It was Ron Simmons, first ever black heavyweight champion. I want to say 1993. Won it at a house show from Vader, and Ron Simmons is a guy I really liked. Definitely belongs in the Hall of Fame. And his stuff looked real. Maybe because it probably almost was. I know he was considered to be very stiff in the ring, and I really liked watching the spine buster. He was good. He was good. He wasn't smooth, polished, technical, but I don't like that. I like a guy that looks real. That's what I like. And he was intense. He didn't have. He had a real promo. He didn't have a ha-ha entertaining, electrifying promo. He had a, oh man, this guy's gonna whoop my fucking ass. As a heel, you go, man, I feel bad for that babyface. He's gonna that whooped. Ross Simmons is angry as a motherfucker. Next on the list is Sensational Sherry. Definitely one of the all-time top female wrestlers, top female managers. Not really a valet, more of a manager. She managed Playboy Buddy Rose and Doug Summers in AWA. She managed Harlem Heat. She managed some other guys in WCW too, I think. She first Harlem Heat would come out, they'd be on the cell phone way back in the day with her, before they debuted her. She managed Shawn Michaels. She sang Shawn Michaels' music originally. It was the Sexy Boy. Shawn sang it later, but she was the original singer of it. She go, I think he's cute. And within that terrible voice of hers. Yeah, she was good. Scary Sherry. She managed Shawn Michaels, of course, in the WWE. And yeah, so she belonged there, I would say, absolutely. The next on the list is Sergeant Slaughter Maggot. The Slaughter belonged there, absolutely. WWE champion, AWA champion. He's a fucking G.I. Joe, 1985 in the G.I. Joe movie, his real voice. I loved it. Was a man. That was a Slaughter troll, but loved that movie. Love Slaughter. I still have the G.I. Joe figure somewhere. The kid plays with it. Master of the Cobra Clutch, the big gut buster. Love playing him in WWF WrestleFest game in '91, the stand-up video game. Which you can see a Let's Play of. The only video game Let's Play on my channel, where I play my stand-up arcade WrestleFest game. Sergeant Slaughter, great. Loved watching him. Loved that move where he'd just grind you down. They called it the Cobra Clutch, but it wasn't really the Cobra Clutch because Teddy DiBiase did the $1 Million Dream with the same move. So he came up with the knuckle grind in the temple. Sergeant Slaughter. It was incredible. He was a great promo. He was a great worker. He was a big guy. He had the stuff with Warrior, had the stuff with Hogan. He returned the Iraqi sympathizer, brought the Iron Sheik in with him. He had the stuff earlier with Iron Sheik, the boot camp matches, the stuff in AWA, the stuff in Mid-Atlantic, even with Donna Cornoodle. Sergeant Slaughter was very talented, and he took a gimmick which sucks. The military gimmick is a shitty gimmick. Like a billion guys have done that gimmick. Ranger Ross, not over. Private Terry something. I can't remember what his name was. Loads of guys. I can't think of anyone else that's ever gotten military gimmick over. He got it over. It's a terrible gimmick. Like The Undertaker. The Undertaker is a horrible gimmick. That's the same gimmick as Mantar. That's the same gimmick as Damien Dementia. That's the same gimmick as a lot of guys. And Mark Howard got it over. People goes the greatest gimmick. It was a horrible gimmick, but he got it over. Sergeant Slaughter is a horrible gimmick, but he got it over. So that means all the more talent. The great promos, the great mind. He's an agent. Even the stuff he did at the very end of his active career against DX was great. And then we bring up DX, Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels was known to be one of the biggest pricks in professional wrestling. Screwed a lot of people over. I never really liked his matches that much. He's a cruiserweight. He had bing, bang, boom kind of matches. I personally think his work is overrated. All that being said, I think he's still good. I liked his Iron Man match, or Iron Man? The hour match. I think it was Iron Man. Yeah, hour match. Iron Man match against Bret Hart at WrestleMania. I enjoyed that. His match with Razor for the ladder was good. He started. I don't know where he started, but I remember seeing him as like a borderline job guy in Mid-South. He moved up to AWA as a tag team with Jannetty, with the Midnight Rockers, became the Rockers later. They would come out to Living After Midnight by Judas Priest. He was an announcer briefly. I thought he wasn't a particularly good announcer. They used a lot of wrestlers in that role. He was no Kurt Hennig. He was no Jesse Ventura. He was no Gorilla Monsoon. He was no Jerry Lawler. He was no Piper or Macho Man. All in all, he probably was the worst announcer they had in terms of a wrestler. But I think that helped propel him up a little bit, being in that slot. Oh, Kingfish, yeah. So, yeah, I think he's overrated. And in terms of world champions, There are a lot of guys I thought were a lot better than him. His ring work, again, it was good. I'm not knocking it, not saying it was bad, but it was a style I didn't love too much. But he wasn't too much of a cruiserweight. You know, he'd go out there, he'd brawl, he'd throw the fists. You know, he'd put some showmanship in it. But his promos, I thought his promos interviews they weren't Bret Hart bad, but they were weak. You know, we go through the list of people here. He's definitely in the bottom 20% in terms of promos. Um, you know, you put him beside a Piper promo or a Slaughter promo, just on this page alone, his promos were not even close to that level. His stuff with the barbershop where he threw Jannetty through the glass, that's good too. Thought it was okay. When he came back, most of his stuff when he came back after the back injury was subpar for his previous work. But does he deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? Absolutely. Next on the list, Eddie Farhat, the Sheik, or the original Sheik from the movie I Like to Hurt People. He was a promoter out in Detroit. He was the NWA U.S. champion. He, in fact, Georgia Championship. So he came in there with Paul Ellering brought him in as like a bounty hunter or whatever. He did the camel clutch gimmick. He had the Persian boots like the Iron Sheik. Iron Sheik pretty much copied his look, but and with the camel clutch. But overall he was a bit different though. And the Sheik was a promoter, and he was crazy. He's a guy like Abdullah. Abdullah copied his style. The Sheik did the same Abdullah style. If you've never seen the Sheik before, he'd hit you with a fork and the fireball, and you know, hide the gimmick here, there, and everywhere. Bring it out, gouge you with it. He'd get down and pray to Mecca, and he's Sabu's, was it uncle? I think he's Sabu's uncle for a shoot. And I believe he trained Rob Van Dam as well. Does he deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? Yeah, he was innovative. He pretty much created that at least that aspect of the hardcore style. Next on the list is Stone Cold Steve Austin. I was never a Steve Austin fan. That being said, he definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He did lots of great stuff with the beard truck, with the monster truck. I have seen, I'm going to say 98.5% of Steve Austin's matches that were on television and pay-per-view and all that. He originally started in Global. I saw his first match was on TV in Global. He wrestled Frogman LeBlanc, and no, I didn't prepare at all for any of this. You know, I just have a good memory. At Global used to come at 4:00 on ESPN, and I watched Global. And his first match, he was his name is Steve Williams, but they had to change to Steve Williams because that's Dr. Death's name. So, but he wrestled under Steve Williams at first, and then I think at first, his first couple of matches or first match or whatever, and then just changed to Steve Austin. And he was stunning Steve. He had a long blonde hair. You know, you would never believe that. And he had two different blonde-haired, I think they're both his wives or whatever, two different blonde-haired managers, if I want to recall, over the course. And he went to WCW. Did, I wouldn't call him a main eventer there, but he was a high-end mid-carder. He had the TV belt, might have had the U.S. belts, and he had the tag team belts with Brian Pillman as the Hollywood Blondes. They're a pretty good tag team. His work as Stunning Steve was quite a bit different than his work as Stone Cold. He was a more technical wrestler then, and he was okay. I never really liked him. I never liked him as Stunning or as Stone Cold that much. He was okay, but and again they did a bit too much. Like he wasn't protected enough as Stone Cold. They was on everywhere all the time. They're like, okay, dial it back. I don't need this much of you. You know, put other people on there. You know, that's being overexposed because something can really hurt guys. And during the Attitude Era, all those guys were overexposed. Him, Bret Hart, Triple H, The Rock. You know, so and that was unfortunate for them. Undertaker never really got overexposed in my estimation. Maybe just a little bit. Next is Stu Hart, the father of Bret Hart, of Owen Hart, of let's see how many other brothers can I name. Smith Hart, Keith Hart, I think there's a David Hart. Anyway, he was a promoter of Stampede Wrestling. He was a wrestler way back in the day, and he was known to train people in the notorious Hart Dungeon, which is a really You know, he was a bit of a sadist, from what I have been told. Sonny, at one point, was, I think, the highest downloaded woman way back when the internet was in its infancy. Well, I think it was AOL highest downloaded woman, her pictures. She was smoking hot. I watched living in Virginia my whole life. We had Smoky Mountain Wrestling, the wrestling by Jim Cornette. We had this deal. We would get a lot of wrestling in Virginia later on. We had a deal where at midnight, it was called Midnight Maulers, and 5 nights a week, Monday through Friday. One week they put like, it was like the C show of WWE on, which sucked. You know, it was like a bunch of job matches from WWE, and that I didn't watch. And the other 4 nights, Monday night at midnight was ECW. Of course, I'm watching ECW. And one of the nights was Smoky Mountain Wrestling. The other night was USWA, and the fourth night was AWF, which was I want to say Tito Santana and Sergeant Slaughter owned it, but you know they had a lot of like ex WWF guys, like in the early like '93 era, '94. That would have been probably '94, '95. AWF was around, maybe '96, maybe in that area. It didn't stay around very long, and I think they might have replaced it with something else. But Midnight Maulers, I would watch a lot of those shows. And of course, you even remember ECW. That was amazing. And Smoky Mountain was incredible. They had tons of talent that never really got that kind of push in. They had Buddy Landell, who was an amazing worker. They had Tim Horner and Brad Armstrong and Terry Gordy and the Rock and Roll Express. They had Jericho and Lance Storm. They had Sunny, who was Tammy Lynn Sitch, that's her name, and she was with Chris Candido and primetime Brian Lee, who became Chains in WWE, and the Underfaker, and he was in ECW, Chokeslam, and Tommy Dreamer was part of the Triple Threat for a period of time. So I've seen her. She's another one. I've probably seen almost her entire career. I saw her in Smoky Mountain, then she went to WWF, then she went to, the order right here. Then she went to ECW, then she went to WCW, and I saw all that stuff. And then, of course, later, she got fat for a while as well. You know, she's past her real hot days, but damn, I don't even like blondes. Blondes are not my deal. I love her redheads. But she was, boy, man, Sunny was hot. And then she came out there, and in the picture here, she's her Legion of Doom outfit. She's looking good. And she looked good with the Legion of Doom. So, you know, she's the flames and all that kind of stuff. It was very good. I quite like that. Tito Santana, he was the other half of Great Valentine. I like Santana substantially more than I like Valentine, but I ain't saying much. Probably my least favorite babyface there. I hate head scissory style guys. It drives me nuts. You know, it's like a fake bullshit thing, and I knew that when I was 7. I was like, wait a minute, why don't you just do this to him? Why don't you do that to him? It's like fucking Lex Luger's torture rack. It's like, why don't you just put your hands there and gouge his eyes out? Your hands like this far from his eyes. Just, you know, you're not knocked out. But Tito Santana, I liked him best probably as El Matador because he was on steroids then and was big. And in Strike Force with Rick Martel, I didn't like his IC title run. I hated him in Valentine. God, I hated him in Valentine. I've seen a shoot interview. He seems to have he's very high on himself. And he owns a barbershop now, or a salon, I think, actually. So, and he's a teacher. So I guess he's a pretty smart guy. At least by, you know, professional wrestling standards. Tony Atlas, the Black Superman. Tony Atlas. I love me some Tony Atlas. I remember seeing him when he came into WCW. This dude I think he was a crackhead for a while. Like, he was homeless, living on the streets and shit. Like, lost all his money. Crazy. But when he was doing the deal there, and I remember when Bill Watts was running, they had him, Cactus Jack, and Barbarian as like a team, like a stable. Like, it was a weird stable, but I mean, that was a pretty badass stable. I'm gonna be honest. I like Tony Atlas a lot, definitely a lot more than I did Rocky Soulman Johnson we saw earlier. And Tony Atlas, his drug problems held him back. He would have been, by his own accounting and the accounting of others, probably the first black heavyweight champion in the WWF. He would have probably had the run with that belt before Hogan, but the drug problem. You know, he was also unreliable. There were personal issues there that prevented him, that held him back. And Scott Hall had some of the same issues, but not to the same extent. Tony Atlas did like the white powder, and it's unfortunate because he was someone I really enjoyed watching. You know, his press slams, a tremendous power. His shoot interviews are entertaining too. So if you want to watch it, also Tony Atlas, a fellow Virginian, So, I did give him some points for that. But I always really liked Tony Atlas. I enjoyed watching him wrestle. And, apparently, he likes to have women walk on his face, so that's weird. Next on the list is Trish Stratus, and this is apparently a newer picture from her because she has a brunette. She actually looking pretty smoking fine in the picture. It's unfortunate her and Lita both got out when they did. They both easily had another 5 to 8 years. It's unfortunate for female wrestlers. They have to start very young and learn fast because they're not going to be around very long. A lot of them don't obviously have the love for the business, particularly how they hire them now. They're basically a lot of fitness models. Some of them get it, some of them don't. A lot of them are horrible and waste of time on television. Trish Stratus, beautiful, and incredibly talented in the ring. She started off as a manager of TNA, which is Test and Albert, who Test is dead now, and Albert, his career got brutalized. He built himself back up in Japan and got brutalized in WWE, hoping he's back in Japan for his own sake. But she was their manager. She had the hot little cowboy hat on. It was nice. And then she becomes a woman wrestler and just gets better and better and better and better and better, and it's just really great. She did the stuff with Lita, her arch enemy, which was fantastic. She did stuff with Mickie James, which was fantastic. Mickie James, another Virginian, which was fantastic. I don't know where Mickie James is from. I've seen her build out of Fairfax, and I've seen her build out of Richmond. Those are both different places. And I can't imagine that she's from either one of them. Having lived in Fairfax, it does not seem to be the sort of place that would have produced a Mickie James. It seems to be a country girl. It is not that kind of place at all. And neither is Richmond, really. So she's probably from some small little town somewhere in the more rural part of Virginia. But we're talking about Trish Stratus, who's Canadian. She's Canadian. And, yeah, she is... she was a very good wrestler. Very, very, very good. Main event Raw. Great stuff. And she had stuff with other female wrestlers that was good. The next is The Ultimate Warrior. Jerry Jarrett, they originally started in Memphis. And Jerry Jarrett actually told both of them that they needed to quit professional wrestling. The match, one of their first matches was there, and maybe their first match. And I remember Jerry Jarrett saying it was the worst match he'd ever seen. And that's a guy that ran Memphis. Boy, you can imagine the horrible matches he saw over the years. So, yeah, the Ultimate Warrior. He was a great entrance. He was a great entrance. One of the better entrances all time up there with the likes of Gangrel and I don't know who else. I mean, there's other guys. Kurt Angle had a great entrance, but probably not quite as good as the Warriors. But he'd run to the ring, he'd hit the ropes, and and if all of his matches could have been like his matches with the Honky Tonk Man, he would have been great. Hit the come up with a flying shoulder, the big clothesline, you bump down, you feed back up, hits the ropes, another clothesline, and a third one, gorilla press, power slam, hits the ropes, big splash, 1, 2, 3. His stuff was good. The problem is Warrior matches past 2 minutes aren't good. I saw a match. The video was about half an hour long. He fights wrestles Orlando Jordan in, I think, Australia. More recently, this is, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. And he blows up fast in that match. It's worth watching. It was so bad. It was terrible. And Orlando Jordan is a pretty good worker. The Valiant Brothers. These guys, the one is a stand-up comedian now. What the hell is his name? I can't think of his name. But the other one is, of course, actually worthy of being in there. Jimmy Boogie, Boogie Woogie. Boogie Woogie was in. He was a pre-Dusty guy before Dusty came up and got the book from the Crockett's. Boogie Woogie was in NWA, so he was a guy when I first started watching wrestling that was on top as a babyface in Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and of course I've seen him in USWA, I've seen him in New York, I've seen him in WWE, I've seen him in Georgia Championship Wrestling. He was, he'd shake the legs, and he was fun to watch. He was fun to watch. But I'm trying to think what the hell the other Valiant Brothers' name was, but he's a comedian now, and of something like that. And yeah, he's not a Hall of Famer. Boogie Woogie definitely a Hall of Famer, though definitely not. Vern Gagne, they put him in there as part of the AWA selling the tape library to Vince. He was a guy, the promoter. He was a promoter. He booked himself on top. I always thought he was small. He looked really bad when I watched it in the early 80s in AWA. I couldn't believe it. I was like, come on, man. This guy? Are you kidding me? You know, one road warrior could beat 18 of this old man up. So I was never impressed with him. I didn't think he had a good promo. He was a booker. He ran a major territory, so I think you need to put him in there. Vince McMahon Sr., obviously they're going to put him in there. So the Von Erichs, apparently, is it all of them? Is Lance Von Erich part of this group? I don't know. I think Kevin doesn't make it. I think Kerry is an NWA champion. I think he makes it, despite all his drug problems and suicide and all that stuff. I think he still makes it. David, the Yellow Rose, I think makes it. I think Terry and David were the two that make it. I think Kevin doesn't. And all the other ones, they go on Kerry. Was it Michael? Obviously not. And then Lance, who wasn't a real Von Erich. I guess you'd also put Fritz Von Erich in there. So, yeah, you put Fritz Von Erich in. Waldo Von Erich was a very good worker. I don't know if you put him in there or not. Maybe. It's rough when you induct the whole group of everybody. Wendy Richter, who's not hot. I don't know how she was a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. She looks brutal nowadays. I saw her shoot interview. Oh my God, she looks brutal. She hates Moolah too. She was really the first one to break from Moolah like that, and I think you're definitely going to put her in the Hall of Fame. You know, you need a couple women in there. I want to say you had 1, 2, something like, I think we've gone past maybe 6 or 7 women so far, which isn't very many, and we're at the W. So the Wild Samoans. Again, I mean, they were 80s guys. I mean, there were the Moondogs in here, you know. Should the Wild Samoans be in there? Probably not. If we're going to be honest, probably not. I don't see any reason they would be. Part of Rock's family, Rikishi's family. I don't know. They were okay. The Wild Samoans, you know, offense, they could never really impress me that much, to be honest. Another guy, he's Tongan. A Ming Haku isn't in here. How the fuck is he not in here? Stan Hansen's not in here. Bruiser Brody's not in here. Dick Murdoch's not in here. Dr. Dusty Williams is not in here. Are the Fabulous Freebirds not in here? Are you retarded? Oh my God, the Freebirds aren't in here. But William Perry and Donald Trump are. Are you kidding me? The Freebirds. Arguably, if you're not putting the Road Warriors up, there's got to be the Freebirds for best tag team ever. Or they're not on the list. Yokozuna on the list. Obviously, 3-time WWF champion. Amazingly talented big man and could do some stuff for a big man. I'm a big Yokozuna fan. I like Yokozuna a lot. I really enjoyed watching him wrestle. And, yeah, so there's that. Is Owen Hart not in here? Wait a minute. Hold on. So that's the whole deal. Is Owen Hart really not in here? Well, you think if you kill a guy, that you at least put him in your Hall of Fame. If you're going to put Johnny Rods in there, you know, Coco Ware in there. Yeah, Owen Hart's not in here. Huh. And neither are the Freebirds. Those are things. Michael Hayes works there and has worked there for a long time. I think. To me, Jimmy Jam Garvin and Buddy Rogers were not Hall of Fame worthy at all, but definitely Michael Hayes and Terry Gordy. Terry Gordy was a fantastic worker. Fantastic. Another guy not in here is Kamala. The fuck don't you put Kamala in here? He was great. If you don't understand wrestling, he's another guy you might not realize how good he was. His selling and rocking, you know, and his stuff, you know, some of his stuff's campy and over the top, but that really played well in New York. I mean, they were cartoon territory, fucking George Animal Steel. So, yeah, so there's a video. It's very long. It's my thoughts on the WWE Hall of Fame from your main man to you, from very, very terrible video quality, which I am unconcerned with if we're going to shoot, and this had been a shoot, my thoughts on the WWE Hall of Fame. So hit down in the comments below. Argue with me. Let me know who you don't like, who you think my list is wrong, why you think Bret Hart is wonderful, and why you're from Canada. Talk about who you think, again, should be on the Hall of Fame, wrestling-wise. Obviously, the rest of wrestling represented in a very poor and pitiful fashion. There's, I'm sure I could come up with 100 guys that should be in the Hall of Fame that weren't big WWE guys or never were in the WWE. Even in the WWE, Kamala was sure as hell better than Nikolai Volkov and Coco Beware. Why isn't he in there? So there's a lot of guys, a lot of issues that you can bring up like that. Let me know who you think should be in the WWE Hall of Fame and who you think should not be in the WWE Hall of Fame.